I just noticed these super yellow leaves. I'm sorry, I'm always showing you my yellow leaves. I'm gonna go ahead and just cut these off now. Hi everyone, it's Kaitlyn from Really Big Plant, and for today's video, we are going to be doing another episode of Plant Chores. Hooray!
Really Big Plant.
So I asked you guys in my last episode of Plant Chores if it was something that you wanted to see again, and a lot of people responded that you really enjoyed it. So first of all, thank you so much for your feedback, and second of all, yes, here we are. Of course, I'm gonna do it again. You asked for it and you shall receive. So we are gonna do another round of Plant Chores. Got to prune a couple of things. I have some plants that I thought I was going to throw out, but actually I'm gonna see if I can try to save them. I've got some new plants that I have some little routine care that I need to do. We'll just see where the day takes us. So let's get to it. We've got this ridiculous little Portulacaria afra dwarf jade elephant bush bonsai tree here, and it's not meant to look like this. It's really overgrown and I really need to prune it up, so that's what we're gonna do. My mom actually got me this plant for my birthday in 2019, so I've had it for a little while now, and as you can see, I have let it just get completely overgrown. So I have been keeping this directly in a west-facing window, and it's just been growing explosively, and it's in a tiny little pot, and I can't water this thing enough. All of the leaves are always shriveled because I either need to pot it into something bigger or I need to drastically cut it back. So we're about to hack this plant back into a bunch of little propagations and try to shape it more into the form that it wants to be in. It's leaning because the location that I had it in, it's sort of like off to the side of the window, and so it's spreading out in the direction where it can get the most light, and I'm worried that it's going to fall over. So, I mean, you can see that if I press on the root ball, the plant moves all around. So this guy really needs some help. I don't have any experience taking care of bonsai trees, but one of the things that I do know about bonsai is that they don't just happen on their own. There are a lot of care and they require constant pruning. It's important that the foliar part of the plant is kept at a manageable size so that the root system can stay really small and still provide for the plant. So when I look at my plant, I can see that it's not happy. I mean, it's still growing because these little plants are really tough. It's in a really, really small pot for how much plant matter is up on top. So I'm gonna just take my scissors and start chopping this back. I'm gonna cut off almost the entire branch. It's hard to prune stuff, but I'm going for it. We're gonna cut it all the way in here. This next section, all the way back here. Now I'm gonna just reevaluate what we look like. The general rule for pruning is that when you start to cut back a plant, you don't wanna take more than like 30% of the plant away because that can really give the plant some trouble. But I'm pretty sure that if this plant were to completely defoliate and lose all of its leaves, it would still grow back because that's just one of the ways that this plant is super resilient. So I'm not too worried about cutting this plant back pretty drastically. So I'm gonna keep going. I'm gonna take it right here. Should I leave it like this with one really tall thing? No, I'm gonna cut it. Take a little cutting right there. So we'll go. Okay, so now what I'm gonna do is straighten this out a little bit. I'm just kind of repositioning some of the soil to straighten this plant out. Now I'm just gonna water my plant and it's gonna get its first thorough drink that it's had in a while without having to support so much additional foliage. So I feel happy for this plant. It's like a big sense of relief, honestly, that I just pruned it like this because now I know that it's gonna do better. Now, I'm gonna show you how I'm gonna propagate all of these little pieces. So I think I'm gonna do water propagation and soil propagation because I have a lot of little pieces to propagate, so why not do both ways? I'm just gonna cut these into some sections that are just like a few inches long. for this piece that has a branch. I'm gonna propagate just the branch section. So what I'm gonna do is cut below it and separate out the one node that it came from and remove all of the leaves from this lower node. And then I'm gonna just take this piece and I'm gonna stick it straight into my soil. Hooray! Okay, so now we have our cute little soil propagation. Now I'm just gonna do the same for these. Just pulling off the lower leaves. And I'm gonna just stick them in the water to water propagate. So hooray, those are my little jade plants. And I guess I will check back in with you to let you know how these little propagations are doing. One of the things that I should mention is that I cut this plant back at a lot of places where the stems are considered woody rather than green and really tender. And normally when you're pruning a plant and when you're propagating, you want to take propagations and cuttings in the green, sort of more tender area. So sometimes when you propagate woody cuttings, especially in water, you can run into issues where the plant could potentially rot before it's able to root out. But because this plant is such a vigorous grower, I'm not super concerned. Also because the woodiness of these stems is not quite the same as a regular woody plant just because of the type of plant that this is. So I'm a little bit less concerned, but I do know in the back of my mind that it's a possibility that these water propagations might rot. And you know, same thing goes for soil propagation too. I don't think one method is necessarily better than the other. Although, so the types of roots that plants grow when you soil propagate them versus water propagate them are actually different types of roots. It's not exactly the same. Roots that grow in water have a different set of physical structures to try to take up the nutrients and the components that they need, whereas the roots that grow into soil are also, again going to be a little bit different. They interface with their environment a little bit differently, which is why when you transplant water propagations into soil, you sometimes can have a period of shock because the roots that develop in water are actually not the right set of roots adapted for soil. So I personally have been trying to move more towards soil propagation, although I love water propagating plants because it's so fun to watch the roots develop. So there is my little jade bush. I'm so happy to have pruned it up, and now we can move on to the next thing. Okay, now I want to show you my latest obsession. Miniature orchids. Guys, these are cool. So I got a bunch of little mini orchids in the mail the other day, and I am completely obsessed with them. And so I am in the process right now of trying to learn a lot about orchids. So I'm not gonna talk to you too much about them because I don't wanna give misinformation, but they're really small and they require a lot of attention because they're mostly mounted on little planks. And so they do need to be misted, essentially watered on a very regular basis, like every few days. I did film unboxing these orchids and I'm gonna edit that and show that to you guys really soon. I've got them in this bottle because I was totally unprepared for them to arrive as quickly as they did, and so I am still waiting on my little terrarium setup. For now, I thought I would just show these to you. So here's one. It's so fun. So one of the things that I have to do is just take my little bottle of water and just spray these down. There's a little bit of sphagnum moss that they are mounted on, and so I just wet it so that these plants can have the water that they need. So I'll just go out, take these all out and show them to you. This one is so cool. These are so cool, guys. I'm obsessed with them. I love that the roots just grow everywhere. So I'm just gonna spray these. Look at this one. It's so small. It's so small. It's like, it's literally like this big. So cute. Okay, so I'm just spraying it. You don't want to like drench the leaves, but they're so small that it dries out pretty quick. Here's another little one. Look at these roots. Just spray this a little. If you're an orchid person and I'm doing this all wrong, I'm really sorry. I'm just starting my orchid journey and I'm trying to learn about these. Feel free to give me any tips, or I would love to know like who some of your favorite like orchid YouTubers are, because I'm really just starting this journey. One of the things that I wanted to show in this video but decided not to because I felt like it would be too performative was me spending some time this morning and a little bit of time every day doing some plant research. It is the information age, the digital age. We've got the internet at our fingertips, and I think part of plant parenting is doing research. Just watching YouTube videos where people talk about their plants from a place of experience or real expertise, or reading articles published by reputable sources about different plants is so important. At least for me, it's a part of the plant care chore routine that I think a lot of people don't really show. For me, part of the joy of cultivating this hobby is learning in great detail about all of the plants that I have. I can show you right now, I just ordered some orchid books. I ordered this History of the Orchid, which is a really old book, but I wanted to read it. I mean, orchids have such an interesting history. I feel like I really want to be part of the orchid community. I also got this glossary of orchid genera, which is a really amazing book. I've just been flipping through it and I'm really excited to have it. There's like every orchid and every orchid misspelling under the sun in here. I've definitely begun my deep dive into the orchid world, which is really exciting. I'll keep showing you these. So I've got this one. Look at this one. Look at how weird this plant is. I think this one is my favorite. It's a type of bulbophyllum. I just missed this one too. Get the little moss all wet. And I shake off the excess water. This one, just wet the moss. Right. And then this one, which is super cute. I just have been kind of misting the roots. And then I just put them back in here.
Really big flower.
I really need a bigger box. I just do this, put my little cap on, and I leave them for another day. So those are my micro orchids. I hope you enjoyed seeing them. You're gonna be seeing more orchids in the future. Just a warning. Okay. You know, I was just thinking that actually I would just go ahead and real quick order some of the plant things that I need to order and just include that in here. One of my big monsteras that I have is like my low light monstera, even though it's huge, and I have been keeping it in the front of my apartment where there isn't a lot of light. And there are 2 new leaves that are coming out. And it's been a few weeks and they're not really unrolling, and I thought they were going to be super legit great leaves. And so I feel sad, and I know that it's because the monstera is in way too dark of a location. So what I'm gonna do is just order some little clip-on lights that I can clip onto the shelf that's next to my monstera and point them at my plant, because I know that it wants some supplemental lighting and it's time to just order something. Okay, so what I'm doing now is I'm going to Amazon and I'm just going to search for full spectrum LED clip-on grow lights. See what we got. So, okay, so here some of these are like more serious grow lights that look like they've got, you know, the big surface area. That's not what I'm looking for. That's pretty intense. I'm looking for something that's gonna be like ideally around 20 bucks. You know what? Here, Amazon's Choice LED grow lights, 600 kelvins, full spectrum white plant light. Okay, perfect. So what I'm looking for are lights that emit a white light rather than that blue, purple, red light, because I just don't want to have the purple light in my living room. So I'm going with full spectrum, And I like that this says 600 kelvins. That approximates the temperature of the light. So 600 kelvins is pretty bright. That's like white daylight. So I'm just gonna take a look and see. I'm just gonna go ahead and add to cart. All right, the order is placed. Yes, internet. A few days later, my package arrived, and I'm just gonna open up the lights and show you guys how they look. This is the huge monstera that I was talking about. So I've got this over here. This is the front area of my apartment, and it's pretty dark over here. So I'm going to just clip these lights onto the little shelf that I have over the computer area over there. First, I'm just gonna open them up and take a look. There's a little light switch over here. Okay, hooray, the lights are on. Honestly, it was a bit of a struggle getting them positioned. The wire arms on those lights don't really want to hold their form, but I guess I wasn't expecting that much because I did pick like the cheapest ones I could find. So there you have it. So I can just kind of show you the setup. I've got the wire running down to my electrical box, basically where all of my computers are plugged in. And then I have this lamp that I clipped onto the top of the shelf. It's not that bright, but I think it's a lot better than nothing. And I'm really hoping that this will benefit the little leaves that are on this plant. Fingers crossed. Okay, so what I'm about to do now is something that I have never done before. We are going to do something with these money trees. I got these two money trees over the past few weeks from my work, and I brought them home when they were like totally barren. The reason why I was able to rescue these is because they're mostly dead. Listen. You hear that? That's the sound of the trunk on this plant crunching around because it's dead. So money trees, Picura aquatica, are actually composed usually of like 5 or so individual plants that are then braided together to form one, what we call a tree. But they're actually separate plants in the pot, and each one of them can exist independently without the other plants. So I brought these plants home not knowing what was gonna happen, but knowing that like half of the trees in each of these pots are already dead. So what I think I'm gonna do is just unpot these, unbraid them, and then separate out the dead trees from the bunch and then repot the live ones together. I also neglect these. It's been a while since I've watered them, so it's very dry. Okay, so I see why this plant is dead. It has almost no root system. So the reason why that happens sometimes is when a plant gets really severely rotted, the roots all die off. And then the plant isn't able to develop a very good root network. And so you end up with plants that have pretty much no roots. So while this plant is really dry now, when I rescued it, it was really wet and maybe had been overwatered. And so there's like no roots left on this thing, but some of the plant is still alive. So you can see from the top of it that some of them are still green. Those are the ones that we're trying to save. I also should point out that I guess I could have expected this, but I'm still surprised to see it, that there are these rubber bands here holding these pieces together. And I guess that makes perfect sense, but you can see how ultimately this can really kind of put a damper on the plant growth when you have something choking the stems like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and just cut the rubber bands off. And then I'm also going to just unwind the little foil twist tie. One of the things that people ask all the time in the store is how long you're supposed to leave the twist tie on. And it's not really like a question of how long, it's just a matter of preference. You can take the twist tie off and know that for the money trees, they're not gonna braid themselves, right? So if you want them to stay in this shape as they grow bigger, you're gonna have to do some manual braiding. which is where this twist tie comes in. So if you don't like the way it looks and you want to just kind of take the tie off, that should be okay for your plant too, but just know that you might see it start to spread apart a little bit more. Okay, so let's go to town on this. Okay, so we've got these two pieces, and they're nice and firm. You know, they feel stiff. We do have some roots attached, which is really good. So I'm gonna just set these aside. I can show you, these are the pieces I separated, look. Do you see how squishy they are? So, glad to be separating those. And then I've got this bigger one, which I can do the same thing to. So I'm gonna take this out. So this bigger clump also has a small root system. Money trees do tend to have kind of a shallower root system because in nature they do grow in moist environments. So you don't see them growing those really big tuberous roots or really long tap roots that grow deep into the ground to search for water, because in nature they have all of the water that they want most of the time. So I see here that this plant also has a rubber band, and you can see how the rubber band has affected the plant's growth in that it's really kind of choked and the trunks are really small here where the rubber band is, and then immediately past the rubber band, the tree bulges out. So it wants to get bigger, but these rubber bands are pretty restrictive. Right. This is so satisfying. I've always wanted to just take apart one of these trees. Okay, I thought that plant had multiple trees in there that were alive, but it looks like it's just this one, so that's fine too. So I've got these little 3 pieces and I'm gonna pot these all together. And voila, here we have it. So I really like this now. Isn't this fun? I kind of think that this looks so much better than the braid, at least in my opinion. And so now we've gone from some, you know, like a plant bondage situation, which is sort of what I think of when I see money trees, to these happy, separate little entities. And now I feel like it's like a little grove of money trees. Really happy about this. I love the little look. I feel like it's such a vibe with the 3 separate plants. So I love it. Let me know what you think. If you think this is awful, let me know. But I am really excited about this now, and I feel like I've got kind of a unique plant. Have you guys seen variegated money trees? Have you seen Harley's? Okay, this is a spathiphyllum, a peace lily, and it is the domino variety, which is the variegated version. And I've had this plant for about a year now. This is one of the plants that I rescued from the store that I was working in right at the beginning of the shutdown in March of 2020. And so this plant came home with me for free. It had been in the store for a really long time and no one had bought it, and it had already been looking very sad by the time I brought it home. Not this sad though. So I was keeping it in my room for a while and it just started to go into this decline. I suspected that it actually needed less light. Basically, I decided that I was gonna just get rid of this plant. This plant has never really been looking good for me. I decided to throw it out and I moved it by my door next to the trash, and it's the darkest area in my apartment. And we put it in this spot where it's right behind the door, so every time I open and close the door to my apartment, this plant gets squished, some of the leaves were getting broken, and I figured whatever, because I was gonna throw it away anyway. But within the first few days of sitting there in the dark, the plant started to really perk up and it started to look a lot healthier than it had in a while, which I guess confirmed my suspicions that the plant had been getting too much light. The plant, for the first time ever, started to have leaves that were standing back up again. And I decided to just leave it in the corner in the front of my apartment and just keep an eye on it and see how it's doing. And now I feel like it's trying. I mean, it's making a comeback and I feel guilty about throwing it out. So what we're gonna do right now is just prune it like really severely. We're gonna whack it way back. I'm gonna cut back all of the leaves that I'm pretty sure are never going to perk back up, and we're gonna give this plant a fresh start. The other thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look inside this pot for the first time in a very long time, which I'm kind of scared for. This is so bad, guys. This is, you know, I have a lot of healthy plants, which I will maybe show you in a second, because I feel like I just keep talking to you about all of my struggle plants, but I do have a lot of healthy plants too, I promise. But for these plant chores, I feel like the main activity that I think is interesting to talk to you guys about is trying to recover some of the plants that aren't doing so well. Let's just look. I have this plant in a nursery pot inside of this bigger pot, and I have never really looked to see if it's gross. So we're gonna find out, moment of truth. You know, it's not bad. I really thought that this pot was gonna be gross on the inside, but it's actually totally fine. And we don't really have any roots growing out the bottom or anything, so I actually feel really relieved. What I'm gonna do after we prune this is I'm gonna take you with me over into my kitchen, and I'm just gonna run water through the soil and leach out the salts. The tips of the leaves are turning really yellow and black, and the way that the plant is just kind of unhealthy all the time, I think has to do with salt toxicity, salt buildup in the soil. Okay, so I feel like this plant is looking a lot better. It's like a real plant again. So I'm really happy about it. So what we're gonna do now is we are gonna go to my kitchen and we are going to try to leach the salts from the soil. So when I say salts, that's like any kind of chemical that can build up chloramine or any of like fluoride, any of the stuff that's in tap water or drinking water or fertilizer that is in excess for the plant. Those excess chemicals cause salts to build up in the soil. They're called salts. So if you normally water your plants in the sink and you let water drain through the bottom, you are gonna have less salts building up in your potting medium than if you are constantly bottom watering your plants, because when you bottom water, all of the chemicals that are in the water ultimately just stay in the pot. They get absorbed and they sit in the soil, versus when you water in a way that water is allowed to flow through the pot and drain out the bottom, that flowing water takes a lot of the salts with it. And so you don't get as much of the salts buildup. But because I've had this peace lily in this cache pot for the whole time I've had it basically, and when I water it, I just essentially bottom water it because I know that water just sits in the bottom of here. And a lot of the little browning tips that I'm seeing have to do with salt toxicity. We're gonna go over to my sink and we're gonna just flush the water through. If you look up information about how to leach the salts from your plants, one of the things that you'll read is that you should use distilled water or reverse osmosis water or filtered water, essentially very clean water for this process. But I think it's perfectly fine if you use tap water. Even though there are salts present in the tap water, flushing it through will still wash out some of the buildup. Okay, so I just ran water through the pot for a little while, and now I'm gonna let it drain in the sink, my husband's favorite, and then I'm gonna put it back where it belongs. Look at how much better it looks. Okay, now we're gonna do a follow-up from last plant chore video. So one of the things that I did was repot a dying maidenhair fern into a self-watering planter to try to save it and see if I could keep the maidenhair fern alive. it's still alive, which is great news. Right after the repotting, within the next like day or two, the plant really started to suffer and I had some major dieback. So what I did was I went and pulled out this cloche, which I've had and wasn't using it for anything, and just put it on top of the maidenhair fern. And I had the fern literally just on the floor right next to my couch, and I put this cloche on top of it, and it has literally just been living there since the last plant chores video. I have literally not watered this plant one single time since that last plant chores video. It's been like 5 weeks. So the fact that I've had it under this cloche has really created a self-sustaining little ecosystem for this plant, and it is growing. It's got all this little new growth right here, which is so exciting. There's a lot of dead stuff too. So it looks cute on this side kind of, but there's dead stuff on the back. And so I need to go through and prune out all of the dead stuff. One of the things that is encouraging to me is that it's not molding. Normally, when I put things in self-watering pots and things that I put under a closed jar, they tend to mold like crazy, but this isn't really molding somehow. So I don't really know why this is working out, but I'm not going to question it. And now I'm gonna just take my scissors, which I already just sterilized, cut off some of this dead stuff. Also being really careful not to cut the tiny little pieces of healthy new growth that are beginning to emerge, like this little piece right here. One of the things that might seem unusual if you were unaware of how these types of maidenhair ferns grow, they have a clumping growth habit, but the new growth actually emerges from around the outside of the plant as opposed to from the core. And so what ends up happening ultimately is that the center of the plant dies off because that's the older foliage. So it's really normal actually for maidenhair ferns to have die-off happening right in the center of the plant. Normally, when you see that on other plants, that's like a bad sign, but that's normal for maidenhair ferns. So if you've noticed that that your plant is dying in the center and it kind of seems like it's dying from the inside out, that's actually the natural circle of life for these plants. So I was just reminded by that because I'm holding back the foliage like this to cut the dead stuff out of the center. And that is kind of how you're gonna have to prune maidenhair ferns in general. All right, we are looking like a million times better now. So I'm really pleased with this. I'm gonna go ahead and pat myself on the back for keeping this plant alive with minimal effort. And the soil is still really moist. The reservoir here for the self-watering pot that I have it in is empty, but the soil is definitely damp to the touch, even on the very surface. So I'm gonna just leave it alone. I'm gonna put it back on my floor under this cloche and wait another month, and I guess I'll check back in with you guys and let you know how it's going in my next plant chores video. Okay guys, I was just checking on the footage to make sure everything was looking okay, and I just noticed these super yellow leaves back here. I don't know what it is. I feel like in real life the leaves don't look as yellow as they look on camera. So I'm sorry I'm always showing you my yellow leaves, but I'm gonna go ahead and just cut these off now. I should mention that I had a little bit of a nutrient deficiency struggle with this pothos until I realized that I was under fertilizing it. So we're still, you know, in a little bit of recovery from that and get yellow leaf every now and then if I don't remember to add fertilizer every time I water. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today for this video. It's been really fun to do another day of plant chores. I hope that you enjoyed this video. It's really fun to just blabber to you while I do the things that I would be doing anyway. So thank you so much for watching, And if you have already liked this video and subscribed to my channel, just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for your support. It really means the world to me. And I hope to catch you in the next one. Bye. My dog keeps putting his face right under the leaf. It's so cute. Do you like the leaf? Do you like plants? Yeah, you like plants.